When I was 12 years old, I started collecting coins around the time we had the state quarters program. And I remember being fascinated especially with Delaware quarters because Delaware was the first state of the Union. And at the time, it seemed like there was almost a bubble of some sort with the Delaware quarters. So everybody was saying, oh, if you see one, even if it's in terrible condition, to save it because some dealers were paying like 35 cents or 40 cents each. And I just got fascinated with that. And I had the idea that I wanted to accumulate 1,000 of those quarters. The reason for that, not only being a round number, was that I was watching some home shopping networks, and they were selling a bag of 1,000 silver dollars, and it seemed like if I had 1,000 Delaware quarters at some point in the future, it would be kind of like that. Of course, now that we're talking 20 years later, I don't see Delaware quarters being worth very much unless they're in uncirculated condition. I'm not too sure. Anyway, so I wanted 1,000 of them, and I remember doing the math of how long it would take to accumulate 1,000 Delaware quarters. I remember at the time my mom would get lots of quarters for parking, and I would always want to go through them before we used them for parking. And on a good week, I might find one quarter. And I remember thinking that it would take 1,000 weeks, and then I did the math, and it was like 20 years. And I guess if I had kept up with the plan, I would have it today. But I was hoping to get them much sooner, like as in before before I moved out of the house. You know, at the time, I had a feeling they would be worth something. And I remember thinking if they were worth like even a few $100, and I had each, and I had thousands of them, that would be really nice. I was when I was a teenager, I was fascinated with a math problem called Ramsey theory, and I remember just being really busy with school, and I remember thinking, oh my god, if only I could retire and just work full time on Ramsey theory. I would sneak 5-10 minutes here and there to work on Ramsey theory, but it was never sit down and work on it for like 10 hours in a row or even 20 hours a day, which is my dream to do. I feel like I'm destined to solve that problem, and it'd just be a shame if my whole life I was busy with something else and couldn't get to Ramsey theory. I really feel I was born on this earth in order to solve that problem, or at least I used to feel that way. I still feel that way, not to the same degree. I feel I'm destined to do other things as well, but at the time it seemed like Ramsey theory was, I was made to do it. Okay, so a couple years later, now that I had some spending money to actually go get rolls of coins to search through, I was searching through rolls of pennies, and I was hoping to find a rare penny and just be able to retire off of it. I remember thinking if I could find a penny that's worth, let's say, $200,000 or $300,000, and then I could marry a girl from a cheaper foreign country. See, at the time, I had just broken up with an American girl, and I didn't like Americans that much, and I started dating Asian girls and East European girls, and I remember thinking if I could marry somebody from a cheaper country, maybe China or Russia or India, and I could just move there and retire. And if I had like a coin worth $200,000 or $300,000, I could live very comfortably there. And I remember searching rolls and rolls and rolls of coins, and I remember doing the math. I figured I'd have to search 1,000,000 coins before I found something that was really valuable. And I remember thinking I would get boxes of pennies which had 50 rolls or 2,500 coins, and it would take me a week or sometimes 2 weeks to look through them, and that was on a good week. If I got really busy with school or I had family commitments, or if I went on vacation, I probably wouldn't even do that. And I remember thinking you had to search 400 boxes to get 1,000,000 coins, and I remember thinking it could take me many, many years to do that. And I was 17 years old. I remember thinking I could be in my 20s before I searched that many coins. And actually, I've already searched 1,000,000 coins. I didn't find anything valuable. It would probably take 1,000,000,000 coins to find something worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so now that's even more unreachable. And I'm gonna have to hope for something else to come up, or else Ramsey will just have to wait. I don't think the coins are gonna get me there. Whatever the case is, that was my first conceptualization of 1,000,000. When I was 21 years old, the U.S. economy went into a nosedive, and as a result, we had our first trillion-dollar budget deficit, courtesy of George W. Bush and Barack Obama. And I remember trying to visualize what $1 trillion would look like. And I remember I was collecting Eisenhower dollars at the time. The reason I liked Eisenhower dollars was when I took the mintage figure of all the Eisenhower dollars made between 1971 and 1978, I discovered that we only made about 2 coins per American. And plus, a lot of foreigners like to collect U.S. coins as well. If you divided the coins, there wasn't even one per person on the earth. And I remember thinking if I could accumulate thousands or even tens of thousands of Ike dollars, that would be a good fraction of all the coins out there. And you can buy them for barely over the face value, sometimes just face value if they're not in really good condition. And so I tried to visualize what 1 trillion Eisenhower dollars would look like. And of course, they don't even exist, but I tried to visualize what they would look like. And I remember thinking of putting 1,000 coins side by side in a row, by 1,000 coins in the other direction, and then I visualized 1,000,000 coins tall. And I remember thinking it would take up many, many blocks. It would take up a good portion of Manhattan, and it would be 5 times taller than the Empire State Building. So that was my first conceptualization of 1 trillion. Of course, there isn't enough copper and nickel to make $1 million worth of Eisenhower dollars. But it really brought home the concept of being $1 trillion in debt. Oh yeah, I have another conceptualization of 1 trillion. My second year working on my PhD, I had written a computer program that could solve Ramsey theory, but of course it would take a long time to run. But it was my first taste of how one would optimize the programming involved in Ramsey theory. I'm still working on improving that program. And I tried to estimate how long that program would take to run. And I estimated it by running about 1/1000th of the program. And it took 1,000 seconds to run that portion of the program. So it would take 1 trillion seconds to run the whole program. And I remember thinking, hey, that's not too bad. If I start running that program, maybe my children will be able to see the result. And so I got out the calculator to figure out what 1 trillion was. I thought it was a few decades or maybe a few centuries. But when I got out the calculator, I discovered it was 30,000 years. And I remember thinking, how in the world am I going to keep the computer safe for 30,000 years? Computers, especially if you're running Windows, they love to crash. And all sorts of things happen in 30,000 years. We could have a nuclear war, or, the Earth will go into an ice age. I remember thinking I had to bury the computer somewhere to keep it safe from all these calamities that will happen in 30,000 years. And it would have to run on geothermal energy, obviously. And I also came up with possibly the idea of launching the computer into space, if it could stay in orbit around the Earth, especially if it could be in a geosynchronous orbit. Everybody could look up and say, oh my god, that's the computer that's solving Ramsey theory. And in 30,000 years, it would just broadcast, it would interrupt all the radio stations and all the TV stations and announce the answer. Although low Earth orbit or geo orbit could be kind of tricky because there's still a little bit of drag. It probably won't stay for 30,000 years. You're probably better off launching it out of the solar system like the Voyagers, although getting the answer back to you might be a little tricky because you won't have the energy. So I never came up with a solution on how to keep a computer program running for 30,000 years, but that was another conceptualization of 1 trillion that I had. Anyways, I discovered that some of these numbers that we say so casually, like billions and trillions, they are huge. Thanks for watching.